Alright guys, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well today. Today I want to talk about children and my position and why I don't have any, and why potentially I may never have any children. It's something that's obviously crossed my mind over the last, over 10 years now. Do I have children? Don't I? Is there a point where I just decide for good that kind of ship has sailed? And there have been times where I've thought that maybe I've been at that point. But there are times when I'm spending time with my wife's family, her adopted family, who has a 3-year-old son. And the other day me and my wife spent some time with him, and went to the local shopping centre. Went to a shopping centre in the centre of the city here, and it was fun. It was good. We had a good time, and kids are kids and all that. But sometimes in moments like that, there are certain times where I think to myself, actually, I wouldn't mind having children. But then again, it's a huge commitment. It's an incredible amount of stress. And as I've probably touched upon before, there is a part of me that's kind of sometimes kind of riddled with anxiety and self-doubt about whether I would be a good or competent parent. And so I guess I've always kind of had this struggle to, I don't know, I've just never been able to kind of sit with any kind of comfortable position really on this whole thing. It's should I be a father at some point, or shouldn't I at this point? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know whether... sometimes I don't know, because what have I really got to offer? What do I really have to give as far as becoming parents concerned? And it's just something that kind of bothers me. It's something that I've just had my 36th birthday, and obviously I'm not getting younger, as you can tell. I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm only a couple of ways away from my 40th. And while that's still relatively young in today's world, I guess, it's not exactly young, is it? I mean, you're in midlife, and sometimes I think, would it be better to have had children 10, 15, 20, 15 years ago? Don't know. And I guess one of the real reasons why I didn't have children, or rather why I couldn't have children, is because I wasn't in a position to be able to do so. I didn't have the financial capabilities. I didn't really feel like I was really in the kind of space, maturity-wise, to be able to be what a child would need me to be. I suppose a lot of it just came down to a need for some kind of empowerment, I guess. some kind of a need for freedom, some need for some kind of liberation, an ability to kind of go about my life in a way that I felt fit without being bogged down by the obligations of being a father and, all the stresses and pressures and obligations that come with it. I wanted to feel some kind of freedom in my life. Because I think for a long time I kind of felt bogged down by circumstances at home in my own country, which is partly one of the reasons. It's not the main reason, but one of the reasons why I came to Thailand, really, because I wanted to kind of get away from all that. So yeah, it was important for me to be sensible and to take a direction in life that I felt was somewhat responsible in regards to whether it would be practical or not to have kids. And I'd say really up until the last few years, I don't really think that circumstances, it just in all sorts of different ways really would have been, it just wouldn't have been practical for me to have had children. And given the circumstances with my partner at the moment, I don't really think it would be a wise thing to do for several reasons, really. I'm going to go into all of them, but mainly because like she's not really at an age that's really, let's say, generally speaking, known for children being healthy. Let's put it like that. So by that I mean cognitive impairments and the possibility of issues like autism and ADHD, Asperger's, things like that. So it's like, yes, I suppose there is a part of me that does want to have children, and I'm pretty sure my partner does as well. But I think, given that I don't have permanent citizenship here in Thailand, it just doesn't really make sense to have children, really, in terms of that stuff. But also I think that we're kind of, I don't really think that we both are in just the kind of circumstances that from my partner's side of things, I think she just wouldn't have the time for it. I don't think she'd probably would have to take that child to work all the time because she's so extremely busy. And with me being at home most of the time now, which is a personal choice, by the way, because I've basically decided that at this point that essentially I've kind of basically come to a conclusion that I've basically kind of drawn a line under the whole teaching gig kind of thing, for the most part anyway. And truth be told, I really would like to move in a different direction, really. I don't really want to go back into that whole thing again. And that's probably also one of the reasons why I don't want to have, part of me doesn't want to have kids, because having dealt with screaming kids all day long, and, as I've said about my partner, her family, her adopted family has a child, dealing with that all day long, every day, is that really something I want to tolerate all the time? Probably not. It's one thing when you're still young, like really young, but I'm not that young anymore. I feel it in myself now. you know. And I just don't think that, I don't know whether I've got it in me, is the truth. I don't know if I have the ability to tolerate that kind of prolonged period of stress and pressure for years. You know, I don't know if I really do have it in me or not. And some people might think, well, you're just being selfish, or you know, you don't want any accountability, you don't want any responsibility. And I suppose there's some truth to that, really. You know, but I don't have to. It is my life, and I don't have to buckle under the pressure of societal expectations to feel normal, to feel like I fit in. You know, there's this kind of like, just kind of like pressure at a certain point in life where we're all expected to have kids and to, you know, and to want kids as well. And I don't think that applies to everybody. I don't think that everybody is cut out for parenting. It certainly, I don't think everyone's, I think probably everybody could be a parent, but not everybody could be a very good one. Not everyone could be a healthy parent, a functional, productive parent. And sometimes that kind of something that bothers me at times. You know, would I be a healthy parent? Would I be, you know, would I be a good role model? And given that it's not just my age, but like just where I'm at psychologically as well, emotionally, a lot of the time, ups and downs, circumstances not really being ideal. I don't think, honestly, I don't think I could justify it. And I think, truth be told, I like my own, I like my space, I like my, dare I say it, freedom. I like my personal space. I like being alone, quite frankly, a lot of the time. And I just like peace and quiet. You know, I don't thrive on drama. I don't thrive on noise and just chaos all the time. It's not my scene at all. And, you know, going back to that the other day when we was spending time with my wife's, I guess, like sort of adopted nephew or whatever you want to call it. As much as I did enjoy parts of it, you know, there was times where it was nice to kind of live out that kind of thing, I guess, temporarily. But there's a difference between that and actually that being your actual life, and you can't escape from it. You know, that's the difference. Is, you know, it's all good and well, you know, me and my wife taking care of him and for a day or so here and there, now and again. That's all fine. I don't have any problem with it. I enjoy it to a certain extent. But again, it can get irritating. It can become obnoxious, and it can get a bit much, and it drains your energy, and you know, and look, it's just a kid being a kid, all right? But I just don't think I have it in me to deal with that day in, day out. That's the truth. And that's the reason why I stopped teaching, because I couldn't hack that I couldn't deal with that level of energy all the time. I just found it too difficult to tolerate, and I was exhausted all the time. I was just utterly miserable. And you know, I mean, you know, if it suits you, you know, you do you. But at the end of the day, I think you have to listen to yourself, and you have to be conscious and make some and look at yourself in the mirror and have some honest conversations. Because otherwise you end up with a child. You end up being responsible for someone for the next 18 years at least. And sure, at some point, they'll become a little bit more independent, but certainly for the first 15, 16 years of that child's life, it's a long stretch of time, and that would put, by the time, if I had a child now, by the time that child grew up, I'd be almost 60. So it's, you've got to be honest about these kind of things. You've got to be realistic, and I think, from my wife's point of view, she's, I suppose in a way it's a bit of a kind of like, it's a kind of fantasy in a way for her, because like while she's not a mother, she kind of gets to live out that kind of a thing through that kind of, as I say, adopted, because that's what it is, side of her family. So she kind of gets to live out that, I guess, motherly instinct, if you like. I'm not necessarily saying that all women have that, but for her, she seems to have that need, to have that thing that she needs to kind of fulfill in herself from time to time, or express, however you want to describe it. And I think I'm probably too unstable, is the truth. I find stability too difficult sometimes. I find sticking at things very difficult. I find monotony very difficult to deal with. If I just want to pack up tomorrow, which could happen at some point, or if things go sour over here, that throws a real spanner in the works. If I have a child, or if I have 2 children, whatever, it's not. It'd be one thing if I had permanent citizenship here, or if I had some kind of long-term visa or something like that. But I don't. I have a yearly. Every time I renew my visa, I get 1 year here, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get it. And it seems to me like it's getting stricter all the time as well. So it's, there may come a point where I may just have to pack my bags and move back to England at some point. And I'm well aware of that. It's like, and I'm sure my wife is as well. So this is probably not gonna. It's difficult. I don't know. It's probably not gonna go on forever. And so, when you look at it from that kind of point of view, it just doesn't make any sense to have children, really, unless there's some way for me to stay, or some other means, visa-wise, I can potentially live here at some point long term, but that's probably unlikely. And also, I suppose if my wife was to move to England, which is probably never going to happen, then yeah, that's a different thing. But I think, realistically speaking, this is probably not going to last forever. Or at least, at the very least, I'm probably going to have to go home at some point, because it may very well be the case that at least at some point, one of my applications might be rejected for something or other. So it's not necessarily that I can't stay in Thailand for the foreseeable future, but there might become a point where I might not be able to get back anytime soon. I might have to take a break for a year or a couple of years maybe. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem to really add. When you add everything all up together, certainly as it applies to Thailand, it doesn't make any sense to have children here. As much as I would like to sometimes, I'd love to have a daughter. I'd love to have a son, but it just is what it is. Unfortunately, circumstances are what they are, and financially, I mean, we could probably do it financially, but I think it would be a struggle. And given that we've already got a few outgoings going on at the moment, it put a lot of pressure on things financially, and I don't think that would be. I don't think that would be conducive to a very healthy relationship. I don't think. So probably that. I think based on all of those things, for the time being anyway, I don't think that I can have children, even if I wanted to. I don't think I can really. I mean, never say never. Accidental pregnancies do happen, but ideally, I don't like having to say it, but ideally, it's best if I don't have children anytime soon. Not over here anyway. Maybe at England in some point in the future, or far future, I don't know. But as I say, never say never. You never know what's going to happen. Life can surprise you, and things change. But ultimately, I think it's for the best that children are kept out. The potential of children is just left to the hypothetical as far as my life here is concerned. And I suppose on other levels, on deeper levels, I don't really think. I just, part of me has always kind of been like a bit rebellious anyway. There's always been a part of it that thinks I don't want to do what everybody else does. I don't want to be a part of, these parent meetup type things, and people hanging out talking about the kids. People, everyone, the whole discussions are based around the kids and all that kind of shit. I've never been something that I was being particularly drawn to or interested in, really. And as I say, it's like, if you want to pack up and leave or go and do something else, if you haven't got kids, you can do that. It's not easy, but it's certainly easier than if you've got 2 or 3 kids running around your feet, and you're essentially locked in financially for years once you've got kids. It's like that's your whole life. And, unfortunately, it has to become about your kids. That life essentially is put on hold. And what that basically means then is that people then play overcompensating games later on in life to try and catch up with their lost youth, their lost years, their lost, most youthful parts of their lives. While I respect that everyone has a right to have children, and that I don't have any particularly any serious issues with that. I'm just saying that for me, I don't feel like massively drawn to having kids. I think is maybe the best way to put this. It's like there's a part of me that there's an if, what if in the back of my head, but it's not something like I feel strongly drawn towards. Like I don't feel this desperate need, this frustration want to have kids necessarily. But it's something that I think as I'm approaching my midlife period does play in mind. It's like you think, well, I'm nearly 40, I'm 14 years away from my 50th. 24 years away from my 60th, and it's it's just like time's running out. That's the truth. Time is running out. None of us are getting any younger, and you realise that, and you start becoming a bit more philosophical, a bit more, focused on existential matters and things as you tend to get a bit older, and anxieties about what where you are in life, and fear that you're not doing what you should be, and you're not where you should be in life, and you're not doing enough, you're not being enough. And I'm sure that having children is having been a teacher and having spent a lot of time around, kids of all ages, it can be extremely rewarding to teach kids, to see them being happy and to see them, achieving things and challenging themselves and all that kind of stuff. That's all good and great. But at the same time, I'm sure there are a lot of parents out there, and although they'll I'm sure probably never admit it, or certainly never admit it to most people, they probably do have moments where they do regret it. And sure, they'll have moments where they probably even resent their own kids, resent their partners because they've got kids, And it's all good and well to see all this highly curated stuff online, on Instagram and Facebook, or even on YouTube, all of this, like, where one big happy family, and well, that's all good and great, but that's just what you're showing. You're showing all of the, all of this, the good moments, the fleeting good moments. What the 95%, the rest of the time, then it's not like that. You don't show. You certainly don't show most of that stuff. And that's the thing, is that that's what you got to remember. It's all good and well, when you're in a good mood or you're having a good day, and it's like, I'd love to have kids, but you've got to remember that isn't the reality most of the time. The reality most of the time is that it's extremely tiring, taxing mentally, emotionally, physically even, and it's an obligation that you can't just escape from unless you want to give your kids up for adoption, which I'm sure most people probably don't, unless you're in a really bad situation, with addictions or finances, whatever it might be, I don't know, whatever. But most people don't do that. Most people have to stick it out, or at least try to. But it can be complicated, and people's relationships to their children and their partners in that mix, it can get messy, it can get complicated, it can get ugly. And, people won't often admit that, but it's the truth. And like I said, you can, if you want to have kids, that's on you. If you feel that you're cut out for it or capable, or you have that you're in the right circumstances, or you have the right kind of money, or a stable job, stable career, you go for it. You do you, but just remember that that's you're not everyone. Just as I'm not. Everyone's different, and there are a lot of people now in today's world that just don't want to have kids anymore. It's not like there's not. It's not like It's not like It's not like there isn't enough of them out there. It's not. It's. I don't know. It's like I get this kind of pressure to want to kind of see your family tree go on, but it's like there's millions of kids out there. It's like me not having kids is not some immoral act or anything, or some kind of unethical thing. It's like there's plenty of kids out there. It's not. So what? Why do I have to have kids? Why do I need to add to that pool necessarily? And it's expensive, isn't it? Let's face it. It costs a lot of money to bring up kids. Especially if you want them to have a good childhood. It's an extreme amount of pressure financially. Birthdays, Christmases, holidays, new clothes, new things, the constant pressure of like trying not to spoil them too much, but trying to show some kind of care and give them attention, things like that. It's a difficult balance. And especially now with, well, certainly in the UK anyway, with the cost of living crisis and energy prices going up, food prices going up. You know, and if you want your kids to have a good education, you probably might not want to take them to a council funded school. So, you know, I don't know, because I think for me it's like if I could, I would have my children educated at a private school, really, if I could afford it, but I can't, and probably would never be able to. But so I don't know, it's difficult, and of course, you know, you've got to worry about their health all the time and how they're getting on at school, and, you know, what the potential consequences of them not succeeding at school and not fitting in or getting bullied. You know, what you know, worrying about the grades and what that might mean later on in life, etc. So there's a lot of things to think about. You know, it's not a simple thing as just have kids. I don't think that's a wise way to approach it. I think you have to be really, really think very carefully about it if you're going to have kids, because we tend to look at things through naivety. We look at things through ignorance. It's easy to sit and say, you know, it's like when you go anywhere in public and you see people like smiling because, you know, someone's couple's there with the kids, and someone smiles at the kid, whatever. It's like it's all good and well when it's somebody else's kids, but you know, it's easy to sit there and say it's lovely, must be wonderful to have children, and it is. I'm pretty sure it probably is, but at the same time, it's a nightmare as well. You know, let's be honest about it. It's a fucking nightmare. It's hard. It's really hard work, and it's taxing on the old mental health. And if you're someone that struggles with mental health problems, whether it's depression or a mental health disorder of some sort, or serious anxiety, or whatever it might be, throwing children into that mix is not exactly the most sensible thing to do, is it? You know, it's very easy to get bent out by life in general. You know, that's before even having kids, and then you add kids to the mix. Now you've got a whole bunch of pressures that you didn't have before, and now you've got no choice but to, you know, tolerate that shit job, that shit career, that unfulfilling marriage, that unfulfilling relationship, or certainly for a period of time anyway, until you can get out of it, because now you've got kids in the mix. And I think really the truth probably is that for most couples, most marriages, you know, after a while, when they've kind of got settled into that routine of parenting, once the kind of novelty wears off, let's say, I think really that relationship's practically kind of dead in many respects. Certainly when it comes to intimacy, sex, you know, time for yourselves, time as a couple, you can pretty much write that off, really. And you might say, well, that's the cost of having kids. Okay, fine. But so I think in the end you have to decide what you want out of life. You know, it's like, and that doesn't mean that you're selfish. I think you just have to decide what you want to prioritize in your life. And for me, I don't think I really want to prioritize kids anytime soon, really, because I don't really think I need to have kids. I don't think it's important for me to have kids. You know, why do I need to have children? You know, what for what purpose? You know, it's like, you know, it doesn't bother me. I'm sure that probably at some point somebody in my family will have kids, and if they don't, then this part of the family tree disappears. You know, whoopie-doo. Okay, well, so what? Okay, you know, that's the end of that. And we're all going to die anyway at some point. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. And I don't want to come across as like indifferent or like cold or anything like that, but it's just the truth. You know, what if you can't cope with parenting? What if you think, oh, I'll give it a go, you know, see what it's like. But you can't just give it a go, can you? That's it. You can't just give it a go. Oh, I don't like it. So, okay, so what are you going to do? You know, you realise that parenting's not for you. Because that's nothing, it's like, you know, what can you really do? Because you decide to have kids, and after a couple of years you decide, I don't want anything to do with this. So what do? You leave your kids with somebody else, you put them up for adoption. It's not something I want to do. It's not something I would want to do. You know, I can't think of anything worse, really, honestly. It's like, I mean, I can understand why it happens sometimes, but it's not something I would want to have to live with, you know, knowing that I put my kids up for adoption because I couldn't take care of it, I couldn't cope with it. And I don't think I could live with that, really. It's because, you know, eventually that child's going to obviously grow up and it's going to be asking questions about his biological father and mother. So, and then you've got some very difficult, awkward conversations to have if you ever meet with that child again. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that there's this perfect solution or that people have to have everything figured out. I'm not saying that any of this is easy. I'm sure it's not. It's not easy. I wouldn't say it was easy to not have kids. I think it's difficult from both sides for different reasons, because if you decide not to have kids, then that's something that you have to live with, you know, and you might one day regret that. But equally, you could also argue that you may also end up regretting having kids as well. It might be nice to see them grow up, but you've just spent the last 20 years or so of your life bringing that kid up. That's 20 years of your life you can't get back. And you can say, well, it's a sacrifice. Well, it is. That's true, it is a sacrifice. And if that's something if you want to sacrifice 18 to 20 or 23, 24 years of your life, whatever it might be, that's on you. You know, if that's something that you think you want to do with your life, then, you know, whatever. Each to their own and all that. You know, it's not a decision that you can take lightly either way. I would say, you know, if you decide that the ship has sailed and fuck it, kids is a long gone dream kind of a thing. You know, because there will come a point in your life where I'm just too old, man. I'm just too old. You know, whether that's 50, 60, I don't know, but I'm sure there must come a point where most men just say, you know, I'm too old now. It's gone, you know, the time's gone, the chance is gone. And I'm sure that there are men out there that probably do wish they had kids, but I'm sure there are probably a lot of men out there that, while they love their children and are happy for the children, they kind of regret it to a point. They regret it because it meant that they didn't waste, but they didn't get to live their lives for 20 years. 20 years of their lives that they can't get back. 20 of perhaps some of the best years of their lives. Because they were too bogged down with the responsibilities of childcare and having to deal with all of the complications that surround that. And not to mention the sheer strain that it must have on marriages and relationships, and because of the endless stress, the endless pressure, the lack of sleep, the lack of money, you know, probably be in debt a lot of the time because you just don't have enough money. So you're maxing out credit cards, you're maybe taking out loans, borrowing money from friends, you know, and so therefore, you know, it strains relationships, arguments become apparent, you know, and it's not pretty, man. It can get messy, really fucking messy, and you know, this is why couples break up after a certain period of time once the kids come into the mix. That's why divorces often happen. I think often that's why affairs happen probably as well, because people feel stuck. They get bored. They get tired of the tediousness of it all. So, you know, I'm sure that plenty of women and plenty of men out there absolutely adore and love their kids to bits, I'm sure, and would do anything for them. But at the same time, people are still people, and people still have needs, and people still want to feel a sense of freedom in life. And I think kids often crush certain things for you. They kind of crush certain dreams. They kind of crush certain hopes and ambitions that you might have had, because you can't really fulfill certain things anymore, because you don't have the time for it, you don't have the energy for it, you don't have the money for it, you don't have the patience for it anymore. And so, you know, and also, you know, let's be honest about the world as well. You know, given where the world is at the moment, and where the world is apparently heading towards, you know, is it a wise thing to have children now at this point? I don't know. You know, I have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future is. But if climate change if it's a genuine thing, which it seems to be, whether it's man-made or it's a natural cycle of the planet or whatever, I don't know. But whatever, if there's something that is driving the severe climate change, or is going to over the coming decades, then you do have to start thinking to yourself, you know, is it the right thing to bring children into this world now, given economic pressures, climate pressures, the potential consequences of radical technological advancements over the coming decades, political issues, tensions, fragmentation, you know, cultural disintegration, societal decay, you know, rising unemployment over the next couple of decades. I don't know. I don't know, because obviously I don't know what the future is. I don't know where we're going really. I don't know how we're gonna be able to adapt to all of that stuff. I don't know. It's a big unknown really. But I fear, part of me does fear, that we might be potentially in the last few relatively stable decades on the planet. It's just my kind of intuition, my gut instinct, if you like. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's kind of how I feel about things. And so, yeah, I think when you add those things into the equation as well, as like, you know, what answer do you get? You know, I'm sure it's different for different. The answers probably vary. And the thing is, as well, is just some people just don't want to be children. Some people just don't want to be parents. Some people have no desire to be a father or mother. They don't feel any kind of magnetic push towards having kids. I think it's more of a kind of inbuilt pressure that we feel that we should have children, but not everybody. I don't think everyone has that natural inclination towards wanting their own children anyway. You know, they might feel an inclination to be around other people's kids. You know, maybe obviously if they're an uncle or an auntie, it's like you can kind of, I can see why something might feel drawn towards that, because like you're not directly connected to it. You know, you can go back to your own life at the end of the day. It's like you don't have to deal with that day in, day out. So I think for some people might be more drawn to that kind of thing, or maybe being a teacher, because it's like, yeah, you spend all day with the kid, but at the end of the day, at the end of the week, you go back to your life, you get away from it. You know, it's not this constant, overwhelming, overbearing like thing around you all the time, on your shoulders, weighing you down all the time. So, you know, in those circumstances, it's I would say if you feel that you want to, if you feel some kind of like paternal or maternal instincts of some sort, you know, maybe that might be something that you might be part of anyway, naturally, as time goes on. Or maybe, you know, become a social worker or a youth worker or a teacher or something like that, instead of actually having kids. because not everyone might be able to. So it might be it's a workaround kind of a thing. And I think that the difficulty with this often is that people don't want to admit that they don't want to have children because the fear being criticised for it, the fear that there's some kind of this kind of sort of stigmatisation of it, that you're not a healthy woman if you don't have kids, you're not a normal healthy man if you don't have kids beyond a certain age, let's say mid to late 30s or something, that you're somehow weird, you're odd, you're an oddball, you're a paedophile or something. It's like you're strange or something. You know, it's all these slurs and accusations and insults and petty remarks get aimed at people all the time, and that's like, well, why don't you want to have kids? Are you weird? Is there something wrong with you? Maybe I just don't. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe I just don't. You know, why don't you have kids? I don't know. It's done. You know, why don't you like kids? I don't know. Why don't you like that particular type of food? Why don't you like that particular type of beer? I don't fucking know. Just don't. You know, just don't. That's it. That's my answer. I just don't. What else do you want? You know. So there's this pressure to like say the right thing and you know, make people feel comfortable around you. You know. So it's like I'm sure people lie about it all the time about, you know, how old are your kids, and this is when you're out there and got the kids, but they just want to just say what they think people want to hear. So I think you've just got to reach a point in life, quite frankly, where you just stop giving a fuck what people think and feel like, and just be honest about it. Just tell the truth. Just say, I just never really felt that inclined to have kids. Circumstances didn't align. I never was in a financial position to have kids. And given that I didn't particularly have a very good childhood, which is truly my case, quite frankly, in many respects, I fear that it might become a copy of my father. Is the darker truth of it. I don't want to be like my father. I don't want my kids to hate me. I don't want my kids to resent me. Is the absolute bottom line of it, I suppose, really. You know, it's easy for people to get caught up in this push to have children, but I mean, you know, how many, you know, so we all kind of like put this thing up on a platter, don't we? Put it up on a pedestal as if parent is this kind of this greatest achievement of humanity or something. Like it's the best thing. It's the only great thing about humanity is having kids. Well, that's all good and well if you're a good parent, but not everyone is. There are plenty of bad parents out there, men and women. There are plenty of kids caught up in all sorts of terrible situations, caught up in drug addict parent situations, alcoholic parents, you know, parents that are in serious debt, poverty, obviously, you know, parents that are ill and were probably ill before they even had kids. Abuse, you know, domestic abuse, physical, psychological, emotional abuse. And I know all about that because I was a part of that when I was a kid. But like I said, you know, just this sense that you might somehow be a part of the problem as well. You know, you might create that kind of, you know, what they call intergenerational type thing, and I think that you have to be very careful about that stuff. And some people I think these days, some people just don't want to have kids because they would rather pursue an alternative lifestyle, let's say, you know, whether it's, especially over here with the whole kind of like blogging culture and all that kind of stuff, you know, the digital nomad culture going on, all that kind of crap. So I get it. I understand that some people just want to travel. Some people just want to live out a different life than let's say the normal, whatever that is, these days anyway. Some people want to build a career, especially when it comes to women. I think over the last sort of 20, 30, 40 years now, been more emphasis on women to focus on careers or job promotion in the jobs, whatever it might be, or starting businesses, building a business, or maybe just like exploring your own passions, doing things that you actually are passionate about. And maybe you're not passionate about having kids, maybe you're not passionate about having a family, maybe you're not passionate about having a partner. Not everyone is. So why don't you have a kid? Why don't you have kids? It's a fair question, but then you could say, well, why don't you have a partner? Why don't you want to have a partner? Well, I like my independence. Well, there you go. There's the answer then. That's the answer. I want my freedom. I want my independence. I want to have some control of my own life. I don't want to be bogged down by screaming kids 24/7. All right. Some people just don't want to waste their lives away. Because you might say, well, it's okay, it's all good and great having kids. But there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, like, am I living my life? Because I'm living my life for other people. But what about my life? Like, what does my life not matter then anymore? Because I've got kids? Because I'm married? Because I'm in a relationship? What about my life? Does my life mean anything? Am I allowed to have any kind of hobbies or passions or freedom or independence anymore then? Am I not allowed to have to explore anything that I want to explore? And I think that's often what happens, that people just get bogged down with all this stuff. They get used to it, they tolerate it, it becomes normal life, they've normalised it all. And they just get stuck in that dynamic for 20 years until the kids grow up and fuck off. And then, they deal with the empty nest syndrome and all that. And then they get old and die. Sorry to be blunt about it, but that's how it works, isn't it? It's so I don't know, be careful what you wish for. It's all good and well having kids, but that means that unless you've got some plans to do things later on in life, that's pretty much your life on hold for at least 2 decades. And also, a major part of why some people don't want to have kids is because they're just too old. They're too old to have kids. They don't have the kind of personality maybe that might be suitable to deal with that kind of need, that craving of that neediness all the time, that attention neediness, that clinginess all the time, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. It's not for everyone. Not everyone likes that kind of stuff. Just as people don't always like that with pets or with their partners or with certain family members or with co-workers, whatever it might be. These things exist in all different ways. And it's not suitable for everybody. And some people want to have kids because they just want to leave a legacy. Some people want to have kids because they want to be taken care of when they get older. Some people want to have kids because they're scared of they're well aware of their own mortality. Some people want to have kids because they want to prove something, or they want to be a better parent than their parents were. Some people want to have kids because some people don't want a kid, but they just knocked somebody up, and that's how they ended up with a child. I'm sure a lot of pregnancies probably do happen accidentally. So there's a lot of reasons why people have kids, but there's equally a lot of reasons why people don't have kids. And I would say that the main reasons are money, relationship issues, fears of repeating certain toxic or dysfunctional habits and behaviours because of how learned behaviour from their parents growing up. Some people don't have kids because they're severely ill, whether it's physically or psychologically. Some people don't have kids because they're on drugs. The list goes on. So yeah, I don't know. It's. I think that we have to, in this day and age, have to respect that we now live in an era where, whether you want to call it hyperliberalism or not, I don't know, but it's certainly it's certainly more eccentric than it used to be. You know, we can argue all day whether that's a good thing or not, but you know, we live in an era now where people essentially get to do what they want to do, and that's, you know, I don't. It depends on how we look at it. I mean, some people might say it's better to have children because it teaches you to have more discipline, more self-respect, more self-control. It develops maturity. You know, it develops a sense of accountability and responsibility. But at the same time, that can also lead to a lot of severe mental health issues over time, financial issues, breakdowns, people just packing up and leaving one day and just disappearing out of lives, which happens all the time because they can't take it anymore. That's why adoptions happen. That's why, you know, there's so many troubles and so many dysfunctional, toxic relationships out there. So I don't know. It's you know, we don't live in I understand we don't live in a perfect world. Nobody would suggest that we do. But I would say that, you know, you have to decide what you value at the end of the day. You have to decide what you think is best for you. And that's all I can really say, is that for what I think is best for me for the time being is that I don't have kids. Because it would throw a lot of complications into a situation that's already, quite frankly, a bit of a clusterfuck anyway. So, yeah, I don't think that would make anything in any way better, really. I don't think it would. I don't think it would cause a lot of problems. It would cause a lot of arguments, and it would. I think it would spiral and get really problematic probably over time. So, yeah. So let me be clear here. I'm not against people having kids. I'm not against people having families. And I respect that parenting is an extremely demanding ordeal for men and women that have to deal with all of the stuff that comes with parenting. I understand that it's as a teacher, having spent a lot of time around kids and trouble, you know, kids that were misbehaving and kids with a lack of discipline, a lack of control, you know, being rude sometimes, and just kind of getting on your fucking nerves, quite frankly. You know, it's hard. It's hard work. It is hard work. But at the same time, I think that those people have to respect that not everybody is like them. Not everybody wants to be like them. Not everybody wants to have their lives. And that's okay too. It's okay for other people to make different choices than the ones that they made, or at least circumstances that they ended up with. It's okay for people to choose different paths in life. And I think we've got to move away from the stigma that somehow not having children is somehow some kind of, I don't know, just some kind of like selfishly motivated thing or something. I don't think it. I think it's often a lot more complicated than that. It's just that people don't often want to talk about those things unless they're in a room with a therapist, basically. So, you know, we've got to move away from this kind of like morally superior type kind of bullshit thing of, you know, if you have kids, you're better than people who don't have kids. I think it's a lot of bollocks, quite frankly. So that's basically my kind of overall point. My overall kind of basically that's all really got left to say about the whole thing. You know, yes, there is a part of me that I suppose in the back of my mind does wonder about whether I will have kids, whether I could be a father, whether I'm even fertile for starters. I don't bloody know. But whether I would even be a good father, I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't know unless I was absolutely put in that position. But given that I found it very difficult to, over a certain period of time, deal with the pressures of teaching, I don't think I could tolerate it probably for very long. I'll just say this in end the video, but the other day when I was with my wife and her sort of adopted nephew, it's nice to see the kid, but like after a few hours, I've got to be real with you, he was starting to get on my nerves. He was becoming irritable, moody, and like I said, I understand, as I said earlier in the video, I understand that that's part of the behaviour of his undeveloped, immature brain, and I get that. But at the end of the day, he's not my child, and I don't have to tolerate him. Thank God. And quite frankly, if all kids are going to be like that, then I certainly don't want kids. And I'll say most aren't quite as dramatic as that. I don't know whether that kid's got issues or something. I don't know, but whatever the case would be, he's a good kid, really. But he can get a bit too hyperactive and he's too energy needy. He's too desperate for attention, and it's like, and I think that's part of the reason for that is because he's not getting it at home, so therefore he's overcompensating, or maybe it's just part of his just behaviour that's been tolerated and it's kind of become spoiled. I don't really know, because I don't live with him, and I don't want to. But my point here is that I feel conflicted, I guess. At times I feel conflicted about it. I don't really know is the truth. If someone asks me, do you want to have kids, that's the best answer that I can give. Is I don't know. Not really. On a practical sense, a pragmatic sort of practical sense, it wouldn't be a rational or logical thing to do, but on a kind of more existential level, and maybe some kind of legacy-based kind of anxiety type thing, then I suppose part of me does want to have kids. So yeah, that's basically where I kind of stand on this whole thing at 36 years old. So, that might change as time goes on, I don't know, but for right now, that's basically what I have to say about it. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope it's been useful. If you found anything I said to be interesting, or you agree with me on some things or disagree with me on some things, let me know in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.